It is 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Still feel free to say where you're coming from in the chat. But thank you to those who registered for our event today. We are recording, and if you want to watch this again or later share with friends and colleagues, the recording will appear both on the Eastman Museum YouTube page and our website. So welcome everyone to today's virtual talk in focus, Machines of Memory. Today we will be discussing the exciting work surrounding the machines of memory, cataloging and digitizing the cinematographic equipment collection. And this collection consists of more than 1,400 objects that trace the invention, development, and advancement of motion picture technology. My name is Margaret Shebley, and I am the Manager of Digital Learning and Engagement here at the George Eastman Museum in Rochester, New York. And I'm here with my colleague, Todd Gustafson, the curator of technology, maybe also the creator of technology. And we invite anyone to ask questions at any point during the discussion today, which will then be read at the end of the presentation. And so including the Q&A, the presentation will last an hour. And at the bottom of the screen, there is the Q&A option to go ahead and at any point put your question. Just know we won't be answering it until the end. We also should have a live transcript turned on for anyone who needs closed captions today, and apologize for potentially any inconsistencies or errors that occur on the transcript. And if you have any questions for our panelists, again, as I said, there's the Q&A option at the end. So thank you for joining us today. Talks like these are in thanks to our museum members and a generous donations to the George Eastman Museum. To learn more about becoming a member and seeing the extensive collection of materials the museum has, please visit eastman.org. Now, I would love to turn it over to Todd and talk about this wonderful project.
Well, thank you, Margaret. And again, thank you for those who have zoomed in. As Margaret mentioned, this project has been sponsored by the IMLS. We're about 2 years into this project now, so we're kind of hopefully we'll be finishing up, I believe, in another year or so. But it's been kind of an interesting thing. Some of these things are fairly small, and some of them are actually quite large. So we're going to go through a little bit of all of the above. So right off the bat, I'd like to thank my team that's been working on this with us. We've got Iris Roll, he's the gentleman on the left, the photographer, and Damien Randolph Spader is the cataloger originally, and now the technology collection manager. This shot, by the way, came from the camera that's right above it. It's kind of an interesting digital camera that makes a thermal printout. We did this just the other day. So the technology collection was recognized in 2015 by the ASME. Really unusual for this. I believe it's the only museum collection that the American Society of Mechanical Engineers has recognized as a historic site. And what's fascinating about this really has to do with the collection itself. For photography nerds, this is obviously a camera collection, if you would, but more of when you get into the more industrial world of history, it's also pretty much a history of manufacturing before and after the Industrial Revolution. So you actually see the changes of the styles of manufacturing from one at a kind, one at a time, I should say. The materials change from wood to metal to plastics. And also the manufacturing techniques. So really, again, it's a history of worldwide manufacturing, one very specific product. So if we start looking at photography itself, it really dates back to kind of the equivalent of the camera obscura, pinhole cameras, if you would. This is an engraving from 1775. And so we mentioned camera obscura. We actually do have one in the museum itself, facing west. This is a view that I took on Monday on a nice sunny day, which we obviously always have in March. So you'll see in the camera obscura, the image on the right, the image is actually upside down. And kind of related to this also is this has to do with the eclipse event that we're having here at the museum in about a month. This will be a complete solar eclipse here. Which basically will have about 3.5 minutes of complete darkness. Now, We kind of recommend coming here to enjoy the experience, but if you want to photograph it, you can do it with a pinhole camera. This happens to be a Nikon fitted with a pinhole front and a view of the mansion. I also taken a couple of days ago. As far as photographing the sun itself, we highly recommend that you do not look at the sun. You should use safety glasses to do this. The sun puts out bright light and a lot of UV. If it'll burn your skin, it'll most definitely burn the retina in your eye, because your eye lens will actually focus it even more. So we have the safety sun lens filter and safety glasses here. During the eclipse, we also are going to be building eclipse viewing pinhole device, which are designed by Damian Spader. We're going to have a workshop on putting those together. Those will be used when we're having partial eclipse. So again, this is the point when you can't look at the sun. During the total eclipse, totality, which will happen about 3:20 Eastern time, it'll last about 3.5 minutes in Rochester, then you actually can look at it and you can photograph it, but just for that very, very brief time. Again, we're really emphasizing safety here. So back to the talk. This is a drawing of a portable reflex camera obscura, about 1855. Portable, I'm assuming this gentleman had multiple people to help him move it, because it is rather large, at least in that particular drawing. The oldest museum's object actually is a reflex camera obscura portable, not quite as big as what that one appeared to be in the previous drawing. The earliest projector we have is this magic lantern projector. Roughly 1830. This is tin, would use a candle inside. So we have a picture of it with a light source inside, not a candle. We don't burn things at the museum. That's actually an LED light inside. The first photographic process was introduced on August 1839, August 19th, actually. That's World Photography Day, and that would have been the Giroux daguerreotype system. And we have from the collection here a camera signed by Daguerre and the complete object for sensitizing and exposing a plate. This would have been exposed for 15 minutes, believe it or not, and then processed immediately after. As far as the beginning of motion picture photography, we generally attribute it to Edward Muybridge, I guess, is where we kind of tend to start with this. This is one of his racetrack cameras. He would use a bank of these to create images of a horse in motion. So it'd be a series of cameras to do that. We have several of those box cameras. They could be animated in machines such as the zoetrope that we have here. And with any luck at all, we can make the zoetrope move. This is basically spinning it, and you'll sort of see the horse in motion. And this particular zoetrope is on display in our children's discovery room. Move on to similar machines. This is a Prex Cinescope. Basically, very similar concept. You're animating roughly a dozen images, in this case with the seams between mirrors. And we can show you what that would look like when I spin it here. You see a nice playing of a drum here. So animating, again, a dozen images, it was fairly complicated, or I should say fairly simple. More than a dozen is when it gets a little more complicated. This is a projecting Prex Cinescope, by the way, so it'll take the image like you would have seen before and add it to a magic lantern projector that has a combination opaque projector with it. So actually you could see this projected onto a wall in your well-decked out Victorian home. Really what's required when you get into motion pictures is film. Film is usually attributed to the Kodak camera. This is the beginning of nitrate film, if you would. Originally, the Kodak film used American stripping film. It was a paperback supported film. You'd actually have to float the image off. In '89, they came out with the nitrate film, which is what actually the experiments that Thomas Edison would use. This is kind of a box of what that would have looked like. And on the upper right, you'll see perforated 35 millimeter film that we actually perforated here at the museum. So again, from nitrate film from roughly that time period. So what we believe currently to be the oldest motion picture camera in the collection is the Cinematograph by Leon Bouley. Now, this is a little controversial. Bouley basically took out a patent for this camera. He was the first to use the name cinematograph, but he did not trademark it, so he lost the use of that. If we look into the translation of this particular item from Gabriel Kromer's list, he's talking about a what literally translates to bushel shutter. I believe it's barrel, which means it's going to be a drum with a hole drilled through it. Very similar to the shutter that was used on the Kodak, actually, that we saw just earlier. In trying to sort this out, we've been doing a little bit of research. We don't exactly have it nailed down. Here's a couple of citations to it, including the Kromer inventory and our inventory index card for it. Basically, this is Booley's patent. And if you compare the patent to the camera, the camera is much more vertical than the patent is horizontal. But it does seem to use the same film advance mechanism and the same shutter system. So we believe this is correct. Again, this is a little controversial, if you would. If anybody has any more knowledge about this than we do, we'd love to find out about that. We are currently trying to track down Kromer's. Gabriel Kromer was the collector that owned this originally. We're trying to find his notes on this to at least verify what he was talking about. It's either going to say this is the Booley camera or he got it from Booley's family. So that's really kind of what I'm expecting to see there. So if we move on, what's usually considered to be the first motion picture device or viewing device is the Edison Kinetoscope. So this is a film loop machine. Basically, in a lot of ways, it's quite similar to the zoetrope. And obviously, to make this machine, they would have had to have a motion picture camera. Unfortunately, that does not exist. So what this does that's different from any other viewer, in the case of motion pictures, the film actually will move through the camera and make a pause at the gate for exposure. And it's usually something called an intermittent that makes it stop there. In the case of the Edison Kinetoscope, the film does not stop. It continues to move, but what it does is, if you look at the image on the top, you'll see a very slight slit. So that slit is timed to match when the film comes past the viewing area. Again, sort of like the zoetrope. So it's basically a moving picture zoetrope machine. This is 1894. What's usually considered to be the first motion picture camera system is the Lumière Cinématographe. So this is a camera system. It would both take and project and print motion pictures. So it was actually kind of a three-fer, if you would, 3-in-1. 1895, this was first demonstrated in December 28th of December that year. So basically, that particular camera was donated to the museum by the family of Francois Dublier. He was one of Lumiere's cameramen. This is actually a photo of him with what we believe to be that camera, taken on February 13th, 1895. This kind of gives you a little bit more of what the camera looks like inside. The little box on the top is the supply film magazine. The tape cup actually goes inside the camera. This is showing with the gate open. Image size is going to be your standard motion picture cinema 18 by 24. The little gizmo on the right is the rewinding device. So when you finish projecting the film, you need to wind it back into the original container. This shows you how the shutter works. This little bit of video here. This, again, hand crank camera running hopefully around 16 frames per second. I do have a brief video online showing this machine projecting film. This is what the projector looks like. So you've converted the camera into a projector. You've changed the supply from the wooden box to just a spool of film. Runs through the camera. The take-up is actually the bottom of the stand. It just falls into the box. Behind it is the light source. It's using a water-filled flask, which acts as the condenser lens, and it would also be using carbon arc in that lamp. This is what it looks like when you're projecting. Again, you're cranking it from the back. You can see the film is slightly running through the gate there. It uses kind of a pull-down mechanism that somewhat resembles I don't know, a sewing machine. Now, there's a little bit of controversy as to who actually did the first projection of motion pictures. Basically, from what I understand, Emmett had actually projected with this particular machine, the Magnoscope, in Waukegan, Illinois, I believe in September of 1895. The records on this are pretty much non-existent. Supposedly, all the newspapers that documented this had been destroyed. So word of mouth is that this was actually the first projecting machine. Gives you some kind of close-ups of what the inside of the machine looks like. It was set up as a loop projector, so we have the light source on the right and the intermittent on the left. And this little video will show you what the intermittent looks like. That's basically what we call a dog and paw. There's a little arm that gets kicked out, and that allows, again, the film to move from frame to frame. Many inventors of these sorts of machines. This is the Sivon projector, or camera and projector. This is actually from Switzerland. What's unusual about this is the style of the system, quite a bit different. Again, you've got a supply on the top, a take-up on the side. The brass arm is out on the outside on the image on the right actually is used to push the film into the box after you've finished. It uses a mechanism that's rather interesting. It's kind of, in some ways, very similar to a mutoscope that we'll see upcoming. So it's using kind of a worm gear and spur gear system. It is the first machine that used actually a completely separate projector and camera system. Thomas Edison did not have a projector. He basically, at least from what history is telling us, he was afraid that if people saw the movies too fast by projecting them, they'd seem too quickly and lose interest. Obviously, that was not exactly right. He would actually purchase the rights to sell this particular projector. This is the Vitascope. It's serial number 2. And this uses what we call a beater movement to move the film. If you look on the image on the right, you'll see a round cylinder that's actually leaning on the film. That actually is what moves the film from frame to frame. Edison would eventually go on to build projectors. This is an Edison projecting kinetoscope. Again, by acquiring some rights from other manufacturers to do this. A lot of this is all about patents. Patents are really, really confusing. There's a reason why lawyers get mixed up into this stuff. So you can see, actually, if you look at the label on it, it actually lists the patent dates of the items. Back to England, this is a press switch camera, another design. Again, this is much as anything else, an intermittent that's just designed to get around patents that were put in place by Edison and Lumière. It uses kind of a rocking finger mechanism device, which I'll show you here in just one second. Really quite clever. But again, it has to be, if it's patentable, it can't be, it has to be different from all of the other ones. So the gentleman who developed motion pictures for Thomas Edison, W.K.L. Dixon, basically got, I guess, tired of working for Mr. Edison, and he went and formed a company with a number of his friends called the American Mutoscope and Biograph Company. They produced something called the Mutoscope. And what's interesting about the Mutoscope is he knew what all the patents that Edison had, and this basically gets around them. So it is a theater type machine, or I should say instead of a theater projector, this is an arcade viewing machine. This particular one is rather unusual. We believe this was a salesman's sample. It's a tabletop unit. There are several others in the world that are known. This is the only one that's made out of cherry. So kind of interesting, again, 1898. And again, the goal was to get around Edison's patents. They would eventually sell a clamshell style made out of cast iron. This is a floor standing unit. And again, you can see the patent dates on here. This is what it looks like inside. It's like a little card flipping device. And this is, will give you an animation of how that works, or what it would look like. This is a little clip from Tom Mix's movie. So we start getting into projection. Believe it or not, it was a business for itinerant projectionists to do train stops, to go from town to town to do demonstrations. This particular unit would be used to do a dual dissolved magic lantern show, and also could show single reel Edison movies. You just basically would rotate the lower lens away from the magic lantern projector and slide the projector head over. The trunk itself actually was used to ship the item. And in the trunk, believe it or not, are tickets from some of the various stops that this was used on. Kind of getting into more Hollywood stuff now. And we're going to see cameras that were made in numerous countries around the world. This is the Pathé Cinématographe. This is from France, 1905. This was kind of your early silent movie Hollywood type camera. If it's in some ways very similar to the Lumière Cinematograph, but different. Oops. Try this again. There we go. So you can see how it works right here. Again, it's using kind of a pull-down claw, but a slightly different design of that from what the Lumière brothers did. The Elgéphone by Gaumont is considered to be the oldest sound sync machine. Believe it or not, so you project movies with this and also use a recorded disc for the sound. This is from 1906. The Debris Parvo was one of the more popular Hollywood cameras. This one has been signed by Mary Pickford. If you see his signature on the upper right frame, the camera belonged to Charles Rocher, who was Mary Pickford's favorite cameraman, 1908. We go back to Chicago. This is Bell and Howell. This is a black box system. They made supposedly 9 of these. We have number 8. Again, it's showing the different designs of things. In the case of this particular camera, all the film would be held inside. So both supply and take-up would be inside. On to Brooklyn, New York. This is the Vitagraph camera. Vitagraph company would eventually become one of the larger studios purchased by Warner Brothers, I believe. This is a very early camera, serial number 2. The craftsmanship on this is just spectacular. You can see the nice inlaid mahogany, engine-turred aluminum on the lens board. Again, 1909 on this critter. We go back to England. This is the Moyne Basti system, your typical upright design for British internal film magazines. 2 magazines inside, 35mm film. Chain drive, and if we go to the next frame here, we'll show you how the intermittent works here. Really quite clever. It's using a little finger that's running in the cam on the below with the rotating shutter. Again, these would have been studio cameras. We go to Poland. This is the Casimir Przezinski Aeroscope. Really one of the more entertaining cameras in the collection. This one actually uses compressed air to advance the camera, so you don't necessarily have to crank it. And this is what its mechanism looks like. Really quite neat. The bronze cylinders or the brass cylinders are with the compressed air with it. Really good. Back to this country, Philadelphia, we've got the Lubin camera and projector system. Lubin actually does have a is marked on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He does have a memorial there. So we have the camera and the projector. Unfortunately, most of Lubin's films were lost in a nitrate fire. So if we look at the projector, we can see it's intermittent. And this is a Geneva cam intermittent, which is used on most of our projecting systems. I believe this is the earliest Geneva cam that we have in the collection. And this little video will show you how that works. And again, the goal is to make the film pause and go from the gate. Really quite neat. Onto some slightly newer projectors. We've got some Nicholas Powers, 1910, the number 5, and the 6B, 1918. The 6B is usually considered to be the first modern projector. First of all, you can see the size is starting to get a little bit bigger, so it's not going to be something that you're really going to pick up and move from town to town. It features the 3-blade shutter, which is what was used to do away with the flickering between frames. It also has a dowser that will close if the film goes slower than 12 frames per second. Really quite interesting on that because nitrate is very flammable. And also interesting is you'll notice that it looks like it's still a magic lantern projector. So you actually could slide the lamp house on the back off and use it to project magic lantern slides. So it's kind of getting into the more of the projection business, but they're still keeping the slides around just because the shows weren't long enough. Back to Chicago here, we've got the Bell and Howell standard 2709. This would become one of the universally used cameras for the motion picture industry. This is a pretty early one. The earliest cameras have the shiny black paint on them. The later ones would have actually a kind of a flat crackle black paint. These were used really up into the 1950s and beyond, mostly for animation in the later years. But again, very, very dependable camera. It's also the first with the external round magazine. Some people call it the Mickey Mouse ear style film magazine, but again, started in 1912. Still in Chicago, we've got a shoe stick camera. Shoe stick is really interesting. And that was the first studio to actually end up moving to Hollywood, believe it or not. So this is an early camera of theirs from their company. Again, internal magazine 35. We've got the Gaumont Chronochrome. This is the beginning of trying to do color motion pictures, 1912. So this is going to produce 3 frames simultaneously through red, green, and blue filters, and it will get projected back through a very similar system, which I'll show you in just a minute. So we've got, back to New York, we've got Moshograph Enterprise optical projectors. The one on the left is the earlier, very portable one, and the one on the right, 1924, is really the last of the silent era specific projectors. In working on these projects, getting these large objects out to our studio for photography and doing it was quite a challenge. We actually had to palletize these up. We have a hoist in the vault that we used to move these. This was, of this type, was the smallest one, believe it or not. And it currently is on display up on our peristyle in the galleries. So in this case, the chronophone, or chronochrome, I should say, this is the projector for it. And again, you can see the 3 colors. So again, each individual frame would give you red, green, and blue, and they combine together to give you a full color image. Now, when we say full color in this case, this is not Technicolor by any stretch of the imagination. We're not to the point of using, we're only basically using film that's sensitive to blue, maybe a little bit of green, no red. So the color is not really that accurate. And from the experience of projecting this with this many, many years ago, there's also a fringing problem. You really have to get everything aligned properly. If you look at these lenses, you'll see they have lots of little adjusting knobs on them. They must have moved the filters from film to film, because in projecting it, we'd get one section that would be aligned and then the next section would be off. So again, pretty much a demonstration unit, 1912. On to really exciting cameras. This is the Akeley 1917. This was really a camera that was designed to be used to be able to pan the camera. It has a head that has a geared system, which will allow you to pan evenly. It also uses an internal magazine system, supply and take up, what you can just throw in the camera itself. They claim that you could change the film in less than 5 seconds. I don't think that would be a museum process. The intermittent is also quite interesting. Here's a little video of that running. It's a little pull down finger, and there you go. So that's just moving the film from frame to frame. Quite interesting. Also in New Rochelle, New York, we have the Willert Model A, basically the American copy, if you would, of the Path A cinematograph, 1912. We don't really know much about this company. They seem to have several name changes just to make it as confusing as possible for us history types, I guess, down the road. But this is the Willert again, very similar to the Path A, but made out of aluminum at this point. The Mitchell Standard, 1935, or 35 millimeter camera, comes out in 1920. This would become one of these standard cameras used in Hollywood. One of the interesting things about it, if you look at the 2 images on the upper left, this does what we call a rack over focus. So the little T handle on the bottom will allow you to move the lens system back and forth, so you can actually focus directly off the film planes. Gives you much more accurate focusing systems. So this is a fairly early one, 1920, and again, these would remain in use probably into the 1980s, believe it or not. They were used a lot of times for animation in the latter years. So sort of the difference between that and the Technicolor camera that we're looking at is Mitchell actually sold their cameras, and Mitchell would go out of business, because once you sold it, you don't own it anymore. In the case of Technicolor, they designed systems and they would lease them, which is it's kind of still the way that Hollywood movies are made today. So this particular Technicolor camera is a two-color system from 1925. So this shoots or exposes a single strip of black and white film through these red and green filters. So it's going to give you two simultaneous images, and their various printing systems would bring these two colors together to give you a somewhat of an accurate color picture. Again, 1925. In Europe, we have the Lights Macau, sort of a rather interesting style projector. So this is a platter system. It's the earliest of the platter projectors. So it basically has two horizontal supplies. The shutter, believe it or not, is that rather large circular prism that's kind of in the middle, and the projection lens is up on the top. So a rather complicated system made out of cast iron and quite heavy, needless to say. I believe this is the only one in the United States. And of course, 35 millimeters, got to be portable because it's 35. So this is a Zeiss portable suitcase type 35 millimeter projector. Portable is relative. If one wants to port this around, you've got to be capable of carrying a suitcase that weighs around 50 pounds. It is not a light device. Technicolor. We looked at the two color. This is a three strip. This comes out in 1932. This is the system that actually they're probably best known for. And what this does is it exposes three rolls of black and white film simultaneously through red, green, and cyan, yellow, and magenta filters. It's a subtractive color process. So it would have been used for fairly early movies. They made these in lots of 7, believe it or not. This particular model is serial number 14, so it would have been made in 1939. We do have a brief schedule of movies that this particular unit was listed on, but there's nothing really in anybody's top 10 famous movies list. As far as theater projection, this is a rather large drive-in movie theater projector, believe it or not, from 1950. Basically, it's your standard 35 millimeter projector, just everything is bigger because it was used outside at a drive-in theater. On the left is an image of a car speaker that would have gone with this. You actually would have, in the old days, you'd hang this on your window at night. By the way, I shot this during the afternoon, but so you actually would have sound in the car. One of the heavier units in the collection, by the way, and lots of fun to move. So this is a Technorama camera. Technicolor 3-strip cameras. They made 28 of them. 11 of those were converted in the 1950s to widescreen. So in its original form, this camera would have looked like the earlier Technicolor camera that we looked at. In those days, it would have been serial number G2. So when it was G2, it would have been used on Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. We do know that. After it was converted in 57, used on a lot of movies. One of the last ones that I know that was used on was the original Star Wars. You can actually see an image of Richard Edlund, a cameraman from Star Wars, standing behind this camera, believe it or not. So pretty interesting history with that one. So 70 millimeter, this is a Todd AO projector. This is, as far as I know, this is the heaviest object we have in the collection. They made about 30 of these. So 70 millimeter, large machine. We had to disassemble it to get it out of the vault, reassemble it out in the studio, and then convert it back and forth. So really a big monster, but this would have really been your typical really high-end 70 millimeter projection from about 1960. The newest of the motion picture cameras that we have from Hollywood is the Panaflex Gold 2. This is from 1987. I've been trying to acquire a Panavision camera, Panaflex, from them for quite a while. Back about 2014, we finally got one. I was really excited about it. And then it sort of occurred to me, oh, they sent it to us because they're not using it anymore. So that's not necessarily a good thing if you were into 35 millimeter motion picture film movies. So this is kind of like the tail end of the really the high end of that style of using the camera. You can see it's on a rather complicated panning tripod system where you crank the handle and the camera swings back and forth. Really amazing system. It came with about 20 boxes of accessories, so it was a pretty good size unit. And the last of my really neat Hollywood cameras is this guy here from the Big Freeze. This would have been a section used on the Matrix. Actually met with the owner of the company, trying to figure out what we wanted to do here with this. I thought a bank of 8 would be really good. So what this is, it's actually 8 Nikon film cameras that have been modified to have an external shutter system here. The little antennas hang down are actually receivers. So there would be a computer system that would trip these individual shutter systems. In some ways, very similar to what Edward Muybridge did with his bank of cameras. So whenever you see a series of films or stop image type motion picture stuff would have been made with cameras like this. They now, of course, do this with digital. Now they configured this to actually hang from the ceiling because that's how they would have originally used it. And again, this would have dated from about 1999. Amateur motion pictures is kind of an interesting topic here. We have really this particular unit is the first 16 millimeter camera. This would have been a prototype by Frederick W. Barnes. It actually used 35 millimeter film whose gate was cut down to a 16 millimeter size. So they're really trying to figure out how big the film was going to be. So of what would become the Ciné Kodak, we have multiple of the progression of the prototypes. This is the oldest one that we have. By Julien Tessier. You can see his pencil marks inside, including the date of April 21st, 1920 inside. Again, hand crank camera for 50 feet of 16 millimeter film. The next prototype is this one right here, 1922. At that time, Eastman Kodak Company still owned Graflex, former Swing Division, I should say. So Tessier, very Graflexy looking camera, leather covered wood box with a leather handle on the top, still hand crank. The next one is fairly close to what the eventual camera would look like, still Tessier version. The main change was the hinges. This one actually has a hinged back for loading the film. Mr. Eastman did not like that idea. He thought the hinges would break, and he was right because one of them is broken. This particular camera was actually used on the earliest known scripted 16 millimeter film called Out of the Fog, and this is a still showing the making of that particular motion picture. There's the title screen for it. So the Ciné Kodak was introduced in 1923, now 101 years old. This is the oldest version that we have in the collection, early serial number. I believe it's 640. Again, hand crank dual proof 16 millimeter. It's the only hand crank Kodak 16 millimeter. It came with a complete system. This actually shows you what the mechanism looks like when you hand cranked it over. Again, very similar to the pull-down claw used in the Lumière Cinématographe nearly 30 years earlier. Safety film was invented along with it, 16 millimeter. It was a complete system, so it came with a camera, projector, and an editor and a screen. Believe it or not, the projector on the left, by the way, is really early, serial number 4. It's only the first 20 or so that I'm aware of had these covered motion picture cans. Across the pond in France, we have the Pathé 9.5 millimeter system with a projector here. The main problem with 9.5 really had nothing to do with the system itself, other than the film was perforated instead of on the edge between the frames, and they found that that actually would tend to tear. So the Kodak system was a little bit different, and really these systems, again, if the film is what's the most important, and if it's not durable enough to get projected, you kind of go into something else. Ciné Kodak Model B, this is a spring wound camera, so it's a hand crank. You wind it up and it goes 16 millimeter, quite a bit smaller than the original one. Now could be handheld. Along with this comes in 1928 Eastman Kodacolor film. We tend to call it lenticular Kodacolor these days. So basically, this is black and white film that's shot through filters with little lenses that are on the film itself, which will give you kind of a color image. These are the close-ups of the projection and the taking filters for the camera and the projector. This is a picture of Thomas Edison and George Eastman demonstrating it in July 1928. Ciné was really a product that was intended to be a huge amateur system for Eastman Kodak Company. In August of 1929, they introduced really one of the most beautiful projectors I think I could see. This is the Library Kinetoscope. Actually had the home system that could be stored in this cabinet along with it. These were pretty expensive. They sold for over $500 in 1929. If you look at that August 1929, this is right before the stock market crashed. So basically, the stock market crashed, and we end up going to a much smaller film that didn't cost as much. So we went to 8 millimeters, half the size. Everything is much smaller. 1932. Again, the goal here was to get the price down so it could really become a much better industry than it was doing at that time. In 1935, we get Kodachrome film for motion pictures. First 16 millimeter was done for 35 millimeter later. So this is the world's first multi-layered film. So it basically, like Technicolor, cyan, yellow, magenta, subtractive, but in this case in one complete film, not 3 separate sets. And of course, it became kind of a legend into itself. Cine Special, 1933-47, kind of a 16 millimeter professional camera used for basically documentary movies, NFL films like these cameras. You've got to have a projector to go with it. This is actually the patent model for the Fritz and Teague design of what would become the Sound Kinetoscope Special. So this is unusual. We actually have all the pre-production models. You can see the case. You can see the projector with the take-up spool in the front, which is kind of weird, and no sound amplifier, and the final projector system on the right. Sound projectors for 16 continues with the model FB40, a rather black boxy sort of thing with its suitcase projector here on the right, which I had a fun drive with Mr. Steve Sasson to go pick that up out of a Syracuse dealer. Eastman Model 25, we're actually still using one of these in our multi-purpose theater for some 16 millimeter films, 1950. We, of course, have changed the lighthouse from carbon arc to a much more modern xenon source, but very dependable machine. Your basically typical 6th grade teacher would have loved something like this, depending on your age. This is the Sound Paget projector. Pretty heavy, they weigh about 50 pounds. But again, a very durable machine and was run for a long time. I believe these were still running when I was in school, longer ago than I want to admit, I guess. On the sort of high-end 16 millimeter, we've got the Beaulieu R16 fitted with a Questar telescope. This is really quite something unto itself. Probably, well, one of the best known movie cameras for various reasons is going to be the Bell & Howell Zoomatic. It's the Director Series 414. 1962 introduced, rather happy woman showing it on the cover. And unfortunately or fortunately, take your pick, it was the type of camera that was used by Abraham Zapruder for the Kennedy assassination. So on the center, we actually do have an image of the camera that Zapruder used. That is not in our collection here. I want to make that really clear. It is not here. That's in the National Archives. The Zapruder camera is really quite interesting. Typical of motion picture cameras at its time, it has a shiny chrome gate on the inside, which will cause all kinds of reflections. So when they run the Zapruder film, instead of just showing what would be in the gate, which is the top image, this is the parade as they're coming around the corner, they show the whole film. So you can actually see reflections and you can see the film perforations. There's been all sorts of conspiracy theories about why this film looks this way. It actually has to do with the design of the camera. You're not going to Photoshop Kodachrome in 1963 or Kodachrome period. So, and to kind of go right along with this, in the collection, we have an RCA TK11 TV studio camera. This again was from WSBC TV, South Bend, Indiana, but it would have been the camera that Walter Cronkite would have made the announcement of the assassination on. That would have been on the other side of him. More into more pleasant things. This is a Canon AutoZoom 814, one of the more popular cameras used by amateur photographers, cinematographers, really high quality stuff. And on the same note, we've got the Nizo S80. And the kind of the high end one was the Lycena Model E 1973. Bolex gets a lot of coverage on this sort of stuff. This is a Rex 5 1970. This is part of a collection that we got from a avant-garde filmmaker from Buffalo, Hollis Frampton, and we also have his optical printer, which is really kind of neat. So he did a lot of stop action, special things. If you do a quick zoom of Hollis Frampton, look for the lemon, you'll see basically a lemon that's sort of turning like the sun. Would have been made on this particular machine here. On to more modern times. Basically, we get into doing talks during COVID, for better or worse. So what we have here is one of my rigs that I've used to do some of these talks. This is a Nikon D750 that can shoot 1080p video plugged into a computer, so I can actually see the monitor. And the Stream Deck allows you to actually control it like a real control room camera system. Much of that has now gone on to mirrorless. This is a Nikon ZFC, which will actually shoot 4K video, believe it or not. I find the camera to be really quite amazing. And the last but not least is the Apple i14. I did an interview with a reporter from Syracuse, Spectrum One, that was actually shot with an iPhone 5. And basically ran on network television. The results were amazing. The camera just sort of blows my mind. I kind of wonder if, you know, the old concept of the best camera is the one you got with you. These are actually pretty amazing cameras. And last but not least is seeing we just finished the Dutch Connection show. I thought I'd put up an image of the flowers from the show taken with the i14 in portrait mode. So that kind of rounds up the talk. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them now, Margaret.
Yeah, we don't have any questions, just a couple of various comments in the chat. But while we give everyone a moment, I want to thank you for this most intriguing talk today. We do have about 10 minutes left if anyone does have any questions, but I can pop in with one while we give people time to think. But what are some recent acquisitions that have excited you that have come into the collection?
Well, it's always kind of a hit or miss thing. Cine-wise, I'm trying to think. I'm not aware of anything cine-wise off the top of my head real quick. Recently, we have acquired a Kodak digital camera that has an OLED screen. Actually, were not sold in this country. They were only sold in England, believe it or not. So we acquired one of those. We actually tracked down a number 2A Brownie, the first model, not a Model A, it's just the 2A Brownie. I've been looking for one of those for quite a while. I think it was only produced for a few months until they came out with a new and improved model. Also in my hit print, well, we took on acquired a complete marketing system for the Kodak disc, which is really amazing. We don't have it's really the design, marketing, and the build. We don't have that for any other product in the collection. And one of the other interesting things that we got sort of a little bit later was apparently Steve Sasson worked on that, and they created a version of it. Instead of taking the film, it actually had a electronic module inside that actually would play back the camera talking. This is from 1982. So you'd push the button and it would tell you about the camera. Really kind of neat. We haven't put a battery in, so I don't know what it's saying yet. So those are kind of the top earliest three that we've got.
Perfect. And then we do have a question now in the chat. So someone says, does the museum have any carousel slide projectors in the collection?
Yeah, carousel slide projectors, I believe we pretty much have one example of each model. Over the years, Eastman Kodak Company has been generous in donating their collections to us. They actually established their own museum in 1923 to set aside their products, and they actually bought all of their competitors' products. So over the years, they have given us that collection. So yeah, we actually have a complete set of them.
And another question that came in is, were there any patent infringement lawsuits during the early years that you know of?
Yes, there were lots. Yeah, there was a big fight to figure out who owns what, who did what. So it's not until you really get into the 1920s that believe it or not, if you were not part of something called the Film Consortium, you could buy a camera, but you couldn't buy film to put in it. And that didn't happen, wasn't solved really until the early 1920s.
Are there any current patent scandals you can talk about?
No doubt. I'm not a patent lawyer. It's ongoing things. It gets to be a very, very confusing topic.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. That might be one of our last questions. I'll kind of give it another moment here. Is there any more about the eclipse you could tell us about the do's and don'ts of
Well,
photography?
sure. So again, we're going to have a workshop. We're going to build probably up to 20, maybe 30 of those cameras designed by Damien. We're really encouraging people to not look at the sun directly. You shouldn't do it anyway, but I mean, the sun puts out lots of UV light. The lens in your eye will actually focus it. You'll actually end up burning your retina. It can cause permanent damage. Again, if the sun can burn your skin, it can do much worse to what's inside your eye. I think what we're hoping that happens is people enjoyed the experience. It's certainly going to be a very busy day in town here because we are part of the hub of the full eclipse. They're encouraging people to stay where they are because the traffic is going to be, I think the technical term is a nightmare. I may be sleeping here. I don't know how I'm going to get home, but again, it's going to be an interesting experience. In the Dryden itself, we are going to be live streaming what NASA is putting up, so you'll actually be able to see a high resolution version of what's going on. And I assume there'll be plenty of people who are taking pictures of just about everything else you can imagine, including me, probably. So
Yeah, absolutely. I did hear
it's going to be a
traffic.
great day.
Yeah, I did hear traffic is not going to be as bad as everyone's been saying. So I think we'll get home at the end of the day,
We'll
but
find
very
out.
excited.
Right. Well, from what I understand, we're looking at over 150,000 people coming to town for the one event. So
Mhm.
it's going to be pretty busy.
Yeah, and I hope everyone can join us here. Well, not maybe 150,000, but
Yeah,
a good
150,000 would
chunk.
not fit in the theater.
No.
We top out about 500.
Well, since those are all our questions, thank you so much, Todd. Thank you all for joining us today. Also, especially thank you to any new and returning museum members and guests. As I said, you can check our website for future talks, exhibitions, in person or online, membership information, and more. Also, if you do have any questions, you can always find us on our contact page as well and reach out. And again, our website is eastman.org. And thank you again for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
And thank you for coming.